Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, publisher of Aspire Magazine, the premier inspirational digital magazine for women since 2006. One of the things that I'm so passionate about, whether it's through Aspire Magazine or the Inspired Conversation show, is bringing you the wisdom of women who have walked the path ahead of us, right? We've all met women in our lives where we're like, how did she rise above? How did she get through this? And those are the kind of yummy conversations I love to have. And today we're going to be talking about something that every woman, every human has gone through. And we're going to be talking about life quakes or life transitions, right? And those are something we all experience, whether it's the heartbreaking grief that arises from the loss of a loved one, or the disorientation felt when life suddenly shifts due to the loss of a job, a relationship, maybe even our identity, or in many cases, a health challenge. Learning to navigate those transitions with mindfulness, grace, and self-compassion is the key to finding your way back to joy, happiness, and inner peace. And no one knows that more than my dear friend, Amy Lindner-Lesser. She is an advanced grief recovery method specialist and certified life transitions coach who compassionately supports women through the emotions of loss and grief that arise with their major life quakes or life transitions. And she is so passionate about guiding clients to understand and navigate that transition in their life with self-compassion. And as we'll talk about today, so many times we judge where we are, we judge our emotions, we judge what we're experiencing. She is also the host of Introspection Show on YouTube and co-author in the best-selling books, which I'm thrilled to be the publisher of her story in Life Shifts, Women's Stories of Surrendering to and Rising Above Life's Challenges, as well as The Grief Experience, Tools for Acceptance, Resilience, and Connection. Amy, I am so glad that you're here with me today for this important conversation.
I'm thrilled to be here and very grateful for you for giving me opportunities to share my story, my experience, and my knowledge with other women.
Well, I think it's so important because one of the things that you really talk a lot about, and I even got to understand it on a deeper level since getting to know you, we all hear that word grief and we go, oh, they must have lost someone, like a loved one, which of course we do feel that deep grief. But as I've learned from you, because you contribute to Aspire Magazine, you've been in my summit, I'm always referring you out because I think this message really needs to get out there. Grief can come with any of the life transitions and life quakes that I mentioned in the intro. So why don't we start there? How does grief play a role in all life's transitions, not just the passing of a loved one?
Well, grief is an emotion, just like happiness, joy, sorrow. And whenever we're in a relationship, whether it's with another human, with an animal, with a job, even with a condition, with our health, when that relationship changes, we experience loss. And coming from loss is grief. If we don't care about something, it doesn't necessarily matter. But when we care, when we love, when we're happy, when we identify with one of those people, or things, we experience loss when it changes. And it's very normal. It's just like when you greet somebody you haven't seen in a long time and you feel happy. When you say goodbye, you feel sad. That's what grief is.
Yeah, and I can remember probably, I don't know, 25 years ago, a dear friend, I knew her since childhood. She got a job about 18, Amy, and moved her way up through the company. So she was probably there, God, about 30 years when suddenly, without notice, the company was gone. Her whole identity was that successful, leader. And I think the suddenness of it, but also it goes back to in the intro when I said loss of identity. That's a big one, right? We hear it
Yeah,
all the time that men that lose their jobs, they really struggle with grief. But she spiraled for about a year and was really struggling to get her footing. That's exactly what we're talking about today, right? A life quake.
definitely. Especially with a career, a job. Not only are your 9 to 5 Monday through Fridays consumed by work, oftentimes that's our social life. That's where we make our friends. That's where we go out to lunch, we go out to dinner, sometimes for drinks. Many companies have sports teams that, you spend so much of your waking life with your coworkers that when that situation changes, it's a huge loss. And it takes time to process those emotions and figure out how to move forward.
Yeah, but that is one of the things that's funny because you just brought back that memory. She said, not only did I lose my identity, my job, I lost the family I was with for 28 years, or whatever that number was. It was multi-layered life quakes, as you just so beautifully described, right? There's so many layers to that. And that's just one example, ladies. I'm sure you can all look back, as I can, as Amy can, to the life quakes that you've experienced. You talk about life quakes in your writing, in your show. For the sake of this conversation, explain what a life quake is and what it might feel like emotionally or within us, so we can understand when we go through it.
A life quake is essentially a normal life transition on steroids. So think about any change in your life. It's a transition. They're normal things. When they become life quakes, it's because it's hit so hard emotionally that your previous coping mechanisms don't work the same way. I see them also, though, as opportunities, because while we will never be the same person that we were before the quake, we can become an even better, happier, more fulfilled person when we look at the lesson that we've learned and how we want to change our lives. So, the thing about grief is that every person experiences each loss differently. So, for even if I talk about myself, the way I experienced the loss of my husband and my best friend were completely different. When my mother died, it was a different type of grief. So we can't look at how we did things previously to say, oh, this is the way I'm going to do it this time, because it may not be. Our relationships are different. We're different because we've had other experiences in the meantime, whether we had coaching or therapy or just figured out a different way to do things. We don't stay the same. We're continuing to grow as life goes on. And so we respond differently. But typically, A life quake will bring sadness, overwhelm, uncertainty, confusion, sometimes happiness, sometimes possibilities. It's not, the possibility is not necessarily an emotion, but there's that, I don't want to say elation, but there's a
It's like hope, maybe hope in.
hope is probably the word that I'm looking for, of what could be. For many women, especially when a parent passes or a spouse, all of a sudden we realize that we don't have to behave in a certain way that we did for that relationship. And it's very freeing. We have possibly made decisions about our lives because of how it affected the people we loved. We tend to be very much people who are people pleasers. We want to make the people we love happy. And often it's at the expense of our own happiness.
So it feels like
Um,
we go through this internal shift of re-identifying not only who we are, but what's important to us. And we're going to take a quick break, Amy. When we come back, I want to talk about that more and also talk about some of the ways that we can navigate transitions. So we'll be back in a moment. I am with Amy Lindner-Lesser of introspection.com. Now, introspection, in is two N's, so introspection.com. We'll be right back.
Life quakes or life transitions and the aftershocks that follow are something we all experience. A life quake can stem from the heartbreaking grief that arises from the loss of a loved one or the disorientation felt when life suddenly shifts due to the loss of a job, relationship, identity, or health challenge. Learning to navigate these transitions with mindfulness, grace, and self-compassion is the key to finding your way back to joy, happiness, and inner peace. Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist and Certified Life Transition Coach, Amy Lindner-Lesser, MSW, expertly supports clients to navigate their life quakes and transitions with warmth, kindness, and grace. Learning to accept support as you navigate your way through the aftershocks is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. Learn more at introspection.com. That's introspection.com.
Welcome back, my friend. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Thank you for circling up with me for this important topic. I am thrilled to have Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist, Amy Lindner-Lesser, here with me today. And right before the break, you were explaining what a life quake is. We're all raising our hand like, yep, and I've been there, most likely multiple times if you've been on this earth a long time. Some of the things that you've taught and written about, in fact, you wrote an article for Aspire magazine, which I love, and it was about 7 steps to find the silver linings that can help you move forward after a life quake. And one of them really, well, there's a few that spoke to me, and we'll talk about them, but one, Amy, is give yourself grace. Like, treat yourself like you would a dear friend or family member. And when I read that one, I'm like, that's what my friend struggled to do back then. She didn't give herself grace for being where she was. So can we talk about that? What you mean by give yourself grace?
Allow yourself to be where you are. I know most of us have heard the expression, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And that's true, that there is, whether you believe there's a God or the universe or spirit, I believe that there is a plan for us and we're always on the right path. It may not seem like it. It may seem really mucky, but we are in the right place. And there's something that we should be getting out of our experience. And so when I say to give yourself grace, it means don't beat yourself up if it's been too long in your own mind to be grieving still. We grieve at different paces. And grief, like life, is not a straight line. It's a very spirally line with going up and down. In some ways, it's like a spring where the spring may get tight and compress, and then it may open and pop out, and then it goes back down a little. So treat yourself the way you would treat a dear friend. You wouldn't tell them to hurry up and get on with it. So don't tell yourself to do that. Allow yourself the space and the time to grieve the way you need to grieve.
That's beautiful. And one of the other things you talk a lot about, and this really speaks to me because, you know, I'm a silver linings kind of gal, right? And I've gone through a lot in my life. And I can say that my resiliency to navigate the things I've gone through over the last 40 years has been my ability to find the blessings in the middle of the bullshit, excuse my language, right? In the middle of the pain, in the middle of the struggle. And you write about holding space for the silver linings, in that we have to become our own guides and stop judging the path. So can you expand on that a little bit? Because to me, that is a key to finding our way back to peace and love and joy.
I think it's frustrating for us because we like having a map. We not like knowing how to get from point A to point B. But in grief, just really like in life, there is no map, there's no GPS. Sort of imagine yourself behind the wheel of a car and your GPS saying recalculating. That's what's happening constantly. And that's okay, because whatever paths are in front of us, it doesn't necessarily matter which one we take. It will eventually get us to the same place. So we have to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. We need to be compassionate with ourselves, and we need to believe that everything will work out for our best, or in our best interest. That when I learned to think of myself as things are happening for me rather than to me, that really helped me become open to seeing silver linings in whatever situation I was in. Um, and it may take time. In the middle of really intense grief, we're not ready. We're not at the point where we can see a point where there is light at the end of that tunnel. It does come. And one of the things that I want to make sure I let people know, if they are not aware of it, is that grief never disappears. It's something that we learn to walk with. It'll walk by our side, and sometimes it'll jump in front of us and say, "Here I am, remember me, start paying attention." And other times it'll just walk quietly, almost like walking my dog, that sometimes he's nice and quiet and obeying where and what I need him to do. And other times he's jumping in front of me, tripping me up. And it helps when you know certain dates in your life, anniversaries. So if, for example, it's a loved one that you've lost, you know when their birthday is, you know when their death anniversary is. If you were married, you know your wedding anniversary. And be aware of when those dates show up. For me, I have what's called anniversary reactions. where all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed with grief out of the blue, but they're not. When I look at the calendar, I'm like, oh, that was my husband Steve's birthday, or that was the date that my mother passed away. It makes sense that the grief is coming up. And I'm at the point now in my life, and we will all get there, where I can think back and think about events and things that were said that make me laugh and that make me smile, so that thinking about the situation or the person no longer make me melt and fall apart. There are times, though, that I sit in my office and just say, I'm not going out today. I don't want to people, not up to it. And that's okay.
It's a beautiful reminder too, to honor where we are. And I can relate, because even though it wasn't the loss of something, I think when Dana got diagnosed in 2019, there was this 72-hour period. And for new listeners, he was diagnosed with a pituitary brain tumor that was found because he had lost his sight. And then 4 days later, while researching that, they found an aneurysm on his main communicating artery above the tumor, but unrelated. You know, it's so funny, Amy. And everyone knows we looked for the blessings and focused on that, and so many miracles came. It's going to be what, 5 years this coming November. But last year, on the date that we received that first call, I was feeling so off.
Mhm.
So I'm sitting there going, this is so strange. Why am I feeling it? It was sadness, a little bit of anxiety. And suddenly, I got that same memory of, oh my goodness, this is the date he was first diagnosed. So everything that was still in my energy field and body from that day, the memory of the news, came rising to the surface 4 years later. So I love that you shared that like that was part of my healing. It came up to just say, hey, we got some healing to do there, but I just held space for it. And the moment I put the two pieces together, it almost dissipated.
Mhm.
And I thought that was powerful too. Amy, we're going to take a next break. We can keep going and going. I'm like, oh no, I got to take my break. When we come back, I want to talk about a tool that you use with your client called Inspir Actions. I just love that name, by the way.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in a moment. I am with Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist, Amy Lindner-Lesser. Please visit our website at introspection.com, and in is INN, trospection.com. See you in a moment.
Inner peace, joy, and fulfillment are yours, even if they feel out of reach. When you learn to befriend your shadow emotions instead of avoiding or stuffing them, you free yourself of self-sabotaging patterns, beliefs, and habits that keep you from living your most authentic life. As a life transitions coach, professional certified coach, certified RIM facilitator, IPEC Energy Leadership Master Practitioner, and Human Design Consultant, Mary Jo Rathgeb intuitively and compassionately supports women to shine a light on their shadow emotions so they can reclaim the energy and wisdom contained within. This sacred work frees women to be who they really are and not someone they think they are supposed to be, and empowers them to live a life that aligns with their deepest truth. Learn more at maryjorathgeb.com.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Thanks for being here. I am personally really tapping into this conversation and the wisdom Amy has to share. And right before the break, I was sharing a moment that 4 years later, a memory of a life shift and a life quake hit me energetically. So thank you for allowing me to share that too, because I'm sure many can relate, Amy.
I'm glad you did share it, because it shows also that a diagnosis or a change in our health also creates a loss. And in your case, it sounds like it was um, a little bit of grieving beforehand because of the fears of what could happen. It was
Yeah.
anticipatory grief. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the unknowns that I think at that time embedded in my body. There was so many unknowns at that moment. So, to have it come up 4 years later on that date. But as you said, now I'm aware on certain dates, like a surgery date was 4 weeks after that. Those are the dates that it may come up. And then I know now to think of the blessings that unfolded from that. In the moment I put the two together, as I said, the anxiety, the emotion really dissipate. It's almost like, hey, Lynn, I'm still there. Um, I don't know. To me, it's just amazing how our subconscious works. I love all of this stuff. So let's talk about the tools you use called inspiractions. What does that mean, and how do you use them?
They are a deck of cards that are being developed at the moment.
Wonderful.
On one side, they have an affirmation or a statement to say it out loud and to help you get into that mindset and to make that happen, to manifest it. And on the other side, because we know that just saying something without action behind it doesn't necessarily move the needle. So it's an action that you can do to move yourself further forward. So, for example, one of the affirmations might be, I'm accepting all of my feelings and letting myself feel them deeply. And then the action could be, I clean my closet and I allow myself to cry if I need to as I clear it out.
Yeah, so it's like getting energy moving, right? That's where the
Exactly. Although some of the actions are just like spread the love. So instead of being home alone in your house, bring a meal to a neighbor who also might be alone or who's not healthy. Um, it might be read a book at a daycare center or at a nursing home. Call a friend. It could be go explore your neighborhood or your town. Go to a museum that you've never visited. Go for a walk. The
I love about giving to others, because for myself, when I'm in that energy, the one that makes us feel less than and we feel stuck, it's the way I like to move out of it is make it about someone else. So I
Mhm.
love that you said, like, volunteer, deliver a meal. There's something in that giving of love, as you shared, that can really help elevate where we are right now. I'm not saying it erases the grief or the loss, but it brings us up a couple steps in our vibration so that we can see the light.
Definitely. And it also, when we're grieving, we tend to pull inward and isolate so that we say no to being around other people. And while sometimes that's important and a good thing to do, when it's being done too often and you're not being around other people who can support, then it can be hurtful.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I'm an introvert and a hermit, even though many people think I'm an extrovert. So I have that tendency. I love to be home. Never mind when I'm going through a life quake, I do have that tendency to pull in. I've
Exactly.
learned, let's talk about this too, because one of the things that I've learned you also teach is we have to allow ourselves to receive support and to ask for it when it's needed. I used to, especially in my 40s, I'm in my 60s now, I used to go, well, they should be able to read my mind. Well,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's not fair to those in our lives, those that love us. We need to speak. So talk about the importance of asking for and accepting support.
Well, you bring up a very good point that nobody can read our minds unless possibly we're an identical twin. And even then, it doesn't always work. Um, if we don't tell people how we feel, they can't know. And even when we need help, someone may have an idea that we need help, but is afraid to make that gesture because they don't know if you're ready to accept it, and they don't want to insult you by saying, do you need something? Also, do you need something isn't always the best response, because when somebody is grieving or they're ill or they're overwhelmed, they often can't even figure out what it is that they need. So on both sides, the best practice is to say, I really could use a friend right now. Would you sit and just listen to me talk? I don't need opinions. I don't need advice. I just need to say these words. Or
Mm.
I need to find somebody who can help me, who can give either therapy or counseling or coaching. And coaching is different in that it's not advice, it's helping you figure out what's the most appropriate step to take. Um, it could even be as simple as, I'm so overwhelmed. Would you mind taking my car and just putting gas in it? Here's the money. It could be, can you pick my kids up from school? I just don't think I'm going to be dressed and ready to face the outside world today.
Yeah, even the little things are the big things when you're in that place, right? Those little decisions and tasks are so overwhelming when in the midst of the life quake.
Exactly. And being a good friend is trying to sort of pull out from your friend how you can help. And then being on the receiving side, it's okay to say yes. Most most of us, or many of us, are so used to always being the giver that accepting is really hard. Just think of a simple thing like a compliment. How easy is it, or how difficult is it when somebody says, oh, that's really pretty sweater you're wearing? Most of the time, we're like, oh, it's an old thing, or whatever. We don't just say thank you. It's hard to receive. We tend to put ourselves down and put down what we have. Something that I'm definitely working on, to accept compliments.
Yes, yeah. That was a struggle for me for a long time too, Amy. I think it's a woman thing, to be honest with you. I really think for whatever reason we're wired. It's that self-worth wound.
We're
So
we're we're socialized to put ourselves last. We're socialized to minimize ourselves. We don't brag. We don't celebrate. And this is something you just talked about the other day. We don't celebrate our accomplishments, no matter how little we think they are. We need to be doing that, because just like gratitude, the more we exercise that muscle, the stronger it gets, the more our self-confidence grows, the more we can then be more resilient.
it's so true. And I'm a big believer of women celebrating themselves. As you said, we were in a private group call, and that came up the other day because I noticed even women entrepreneurs on top of that, are always going to the next thing. They're never taking a moment to go, whoa, I just did that, whether it's a micro moment or a big moment. So let's talk about this life quakes journey, because you believe it's really, really important to acknowledge and celebrate the growth as you're navigating from grieving to thriving. So what are some of the ways that they could celebrate those micro moments?
To take some time and think about who you were before the life quake. What were some of your typical behaviors? What did you do? And now, after the life quake, what are you doing that either you didn't know how to do or didn't think you were strong enough to do, or never even thought to do? And then say, wow, look how far I've come. It could be as simple as um, if you're in a marriage and your spouse has always handled paying bills, and then you get a divorce. All of a sudden, you have to adult and you have to figure out how to pay your bills. Writing that first check, celebrate it. It's a skill you now have that you didn't have before. If it's living alone for the first time, celebrate it. Celebrate cooking for yourself. Or, like many women, celebrate going out to eat on your own. I know that's a big fear of many women, to be in public alone. I guarantee nobody cares that you're sitting there by yourself. They're not all staring at you. They're not all thinking about, why is she doing that? You can take a book with you and celebrate that you've tried something new. Allow yourself more self-care.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a big one.
And self-care is something we tend not to do for whatever reason. And when we're grieving, I think it gets further away from our conscious mind. We're sort of thinking that when we're grieving, we're supposed to be miserable. Not true. We're not supposed to be miserable. I don't think the universe would have created us to be that way. It's learning also to set some boundaries for yourself, and then celebrating when it worked, when you put that boundary into action. So whether it's saying no to an invitation, whether it's ending a friendship.
Whatever we need to set, right, in order to
Exactly.
feel loved, supported, protected. And for me, that was a big one years ago, learning how to set spiritual and emotional boundaries so that I could maintain my spiritual, emotional, and many times physical health. These are all such great strategies, tips, and I know everyone's walking away with some insights. We're going to take our final break and we'll come back for the last segment and we'll dive in even deeper, my friends. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to magnetize your soulmate partner? It is possible. It begins by learning to become your own soulmate and falling in love with your life. Karen McPhail is a soulmate manifestation coach, infinite possibilities trainer, and certified quantum manifestation coach. Karen is also the creator of the popular Soulmate Solution program, a best-selling co-author, and empowering media guest. Karen not only teaches the law of attraction and soulmate manifesting principles, she used them to call in her own soulmate after many years as a single mother and school teacher. Her personal journey to attracting love using the soulmate solution strategies is what fuels her passion for supporting other women to do the same. If you're ready to magnetize your soulmate partner, take the first step now and visit infinitelifepossibilities.com.
Thanks for being here. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. With me is Amy Lindner-Lesser, host of Introspection Show. You can find that on YouTube. Great conversations. And you can learn more about her services and offerings. She has a beautiful complimentary gift there at introspection.com. Again, in is spelled INN, introspection.com. So, Amy, one of the things too, as you were talking about celebrating your growth, I can remember even after one of my life quakes a couple years ago with emergency surgery, I looked at every little moment. And I think that's because I have that mindset of looking for the silver linings, looking for the blessings. But I celebrated everything. The first day I got up with the walker, even though I couldn't walk, I at least stood up. And I remember going, oh my God, I stood up. And I could see the nurse looking at me like, but you didn't take a step. But internally, I knew if I didn't celebrate that micro moment, then I was never going to take the next moment. And that was a big part of my healing. And now I guide my clients to do the same. So even if someone is grieving, as you shared in your article, even going out to the mailbox to get the mail after being in the house like a hermit, grieving for 3 weeks, that's a milestone. That's a
Definitely.
celebration. It's those little things that we never give ourselves credit for. I think it's such an important part of our healing journey and reconnecting to what gives us joy. So I'd love to talk about that too in this segment. How do we, and I know your inspirations help that because I'm looking at some of your beautiful affirmations, like for the affirmation of acknowledge and celebrate your growth, you have, I celebrate each step of my journey. I know that I'm moving forward with each milestone, regardless of the size. In regard to support, one of your beautiful affirmations are, I ask for an accept help when I need it. So, when you're in that place of healing, and as you're starting to move forward from like grieving and you're stepping towards thriving a little. So you've moved through a lot of the dense stuff. How do you re-identify what gives you joy? Like my friend, for example, she only had that identity. She didn't remember the things she liked to do because she was always with the same people doing the same things. She lost herself. Do you notice with a lot of life quakes, that's what happens?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is common. And one of the things to do is to take an inventory, go back to your childhood and look at what are the things that lit you up when you were a child? What did you love to do? What brought joy to your life? What made you laugh? What could you have done for hours and hours without getting tired? And then go into your teenage years and think of the same thing. And also add, what did you dream of doing when you grew up? If money and education were not an object, what would you have wanted to do? And do that through each time frame in your life. And then say, okay, let's look at the future. Let's dream a little. And often when we're grieving, we don't remember our nighttime dreams, but we also don't have future dreams. We're so stuck in the sadness and the loss that we don't allow ourselves to think of a future. And it's important to give yourself permission to think of a future. It's not cheating or being unloyal to whatever your loss was. It's okay to have a future.
I love that. It's like vision.
I'm sorry.
That's so powerful. And Amy, are you a big journaler?
I am. I love journaling.
Me
And
too, because I could see doing everything you just said, like in my journal, and then having a conversation of what will I try now from back then. Like I used to think I always wanted to be an artist, right? So that's creative.
Mhm.
And I painted for 30 years from up until I was 32, no, 42. And then would sell a lot of paintings. And then I never picked up a paintbrush since. But here's the funny thing. Now that I look back, art was just the methodology. The painting was a methodology. You know me personally. I use my creative energies, but it was through each life transition that I kept going, how can I nurture that part of myself? That's what you're speaking about, right? So I nurtured my creative spirit in new ways as life kept unfolding. When you journal every day, are you always using affirmations? Because that's what I do, and I'm curious. Because affirmations are a big part of your work. So in your personal work, is that what you do?
I don't journal with affirmations. I do get up every morning and read through my affirmations, add new ones, take some away. Um, but I journal mostly my feelings. I've also started a tradition that on New Year's Eve, I write in my journal and I write a letter to my late husband. And I tell him everything that happened that was important to me for the year, all of my feelings, all the things I accomplished, the things that didn't quite turn out the way I wanted them to. And I talk about what I miss about him. And this year I'm going to be doing that on his birthday, which is coming up, I think, right around the time this is airing. Um,
Mm,
and just, it's halfway through the year for me, for my birthday year.
yeah.
And we'll we'll let him know that I'm thinking about him, or maybe it'll be to my best friend because her birthday isn't would have been in April. So at some point I will be starting a new tradition of a different type of journal.
That is powerful and beautiful. And um, everyone, we had a little tech glitch, so you may hear a little glitch as you're listening. So thank you for your patience. So as we come to a close, if someone is in the middle of a life quake right now, what is one thing you want their heart to know?
If you're in the middle of a life quake, you may not even realize it, but know that you will come out of it. You will come out stronger and changed, and your future can be anything that you make of it, that it can be as wonderful as you want. Just trust. Trust that the universe has your back and will keep carrying you. So I see grief as a stormy sea, and the waves keep rolling, but know that eventually you'll get to calm waters and things will go, they'll go beautifully, and you will be changed forever, and you can be changed forever for the good.
I believe that just from my own life experiences, the darkest days of my life, as hard as they were, when I look back, were really um, setting me up for what was to come. Because all my darkest times, I learned about empathy, self-compassion. I found out how resilient I was, how strong. All that, those lessons come when we choose, come with us into this newest version of ourselves. So now I can look back and I don't have any regrets of anything that I've experienced and lived, because I'm like, it was preparing me for the beautiful life that is ahead on the other side of the pain, on the other side of the loss, on the other side of the grief. So if right now, to my beautiful listeners, if right now you're like, there is no light, I can't see it, just hold on, ask for support, celebrate your successes, reach out to Amy. or whoever you need to get you through. But I promise you, the light is there. It's there.
Definitely.
So, Amy, I want to say thank you for the work you're doing in the world. Thank you for joining me. I want to invite everyone to visit Amy again at introspection.com. In is spelled like the word in, I-N-N, trospection.com. And until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.